All right, we're live. Sorry for a few minute delay. Hello, everyone. We are here with a few special guests. We got Dimitri, who has been on before, Fluent co-founder and CTO. Chris, aka Protocol Whisperer, our one of our DevRels. And then our dear friend Santi, Harry Potter fanatic, co-host of Empire, and OG investor, just the man. So anyway, welcome all of you guys and all the viewers. Excited to get into it. We just obviously launched our public DevNet, but Santi, I'll kind of pass it over to you.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks for the kind intro, Dino, and thanks everyone for joining. So, Dino, we had you on Empire a few weeks back. I think that's a really good episode for people to get a better understanding. But hopefully, this would be a really good understanding just of why it's exciting and just high level overview. So, why don't we get started? Maybe with just a very basic introduction for people that might have just been hearing it for the first time. One of you guys, like, let's just start with like, what is blended execution?
Sure. Yeah, I can start this one off. So blended execution is this idea that a blockchain execution environment can support apps, so programs from various virtual machines, so traditionally different VM ecosystems within one state machine in a way where each of these apps can actually compose with each other atomically and in real time. Um, and so the question is, of course, like, why does that matter? And I would probably say that the most succinct way I could put it is blended execution matters because the more expressive you can, make a developer sandbox, the more compelling things get built, like full stop. And one thing I would certainly never bet against is developer ingenuity. So I mean, you think about even like Web 2, right? Like the way Web 2 has built these apps that millions of billions of people use and love is by giving people kind of like the best tools to optimize things and the best kind of like experiences pop out. So we think that the only way forward to actually get that type of scale for crypto apps is the same thing.
Got it. And what is kind of the new public DevNet all about?
Yeah, so I can start this one off too, and then if you guys want to shed light on it, Dimitri and Chris. But so the first thing I just mentioned, clearly very abstract, very high level, like kind of that's the idea behind like blended execution. But like, what is Fluent specifically? We'll start there. So like, Fluent is the first blended execution network, and it is a specifically an Ethereum L2 that supports SVM, EVM, and WASM apps. Very simple. So like if you're EVM dev, basically, and we'll get to this, but like kind of copy and paste your Solidity app into the environment. If you're SVM dev, same exact thing. It's very easy. If you're a WASM, if you're a dev familiar with kind of like WASM based languages, you can leverage the millions of libraries like holistically, like across these different languages. We're starting off with Rust, and which we'll talk to more in a bit. But that's kind of the idea, and you can kind of mix and match these different things. I would probably say like the main, just to kind of reiterate for people just tuning in for the first time, the reason why that type of environment is compelling, like more concretely from what I said before, is that like if you're an existing dev, if you're a dev with an existing Solidity app, what happens? Like you can copy and paste it into Fluent L2 and it gets access and can compose with apps that it wouldn't get access to before. Like it makes it easier to kind of like build upon each other, and like trends towards like higher kind of like liquidity getting like packed in, just because it's so easy to do. And there's a few specific examples like flash loans that it uniquely enables, but that's kind of like the case for an existing app. And then like if you look at like a net new app, I mean, if you're a net new app developer, if you look through that lens, like everything's just a building block, right? Like so Solidity smart contracts, they're building blocks, SVM smart contracts, they're building blocks, WASM smart contracts and libraries, they're building blocks. And then if you're building some new app, like what do you need to do? Like you want to just stitch. What did we learn from DeFi, right? Like that the more kind of tools you can put in the sandbox, and the more developers you get in that sandbox, it turbocharges innovation. And like we just think that blended execution takes that to the next level in terms of expressivity. and so anyway, just a little bit of like kind of why, like what exactly Fluent is and why it matters. And then for the public DevNet, this is our kind of initial public release, really aimed at developers. And we want people to get in there and start hacking away. But I'll stop there. Leave these guys to jump in if there's extra light they want to share, and otherwise we can keep going.
Sure. So what's new about this public DevNet is that we have some new docs that developers can go and skim into it. We have some great tutorials about how you can start porting EVM apps into Fluent and how you can craft your first blended execution app. Having in mind that you can create a Solidity smart contract app, and then you can power up by doing heavy computation in Rust. And this is all verifiable on OVM too.
That's great. And so, I guess before we dial it in a little bit more into the specifics, I just want to, I mean, Dino, you guys announced blended execution a couple weeks ago. Um, what kind of developer interest have you gotten since? I mean, I know there's presumably from many different ecosystems or just types of developers. For people maybe listening, might be curious, like if this is actually for them. So maybe if you could just give us some color on who actually reached out, where have you been seeing the most amount of interest before we kind of go into more specifics of DevNet.
Yeah, so even this can kind of be separated between kind of like near to medium term and longer term, right? So like initially, because some of it is just the broader vision around blended execution, people like finding that attractive, and then obviously you have to at some point drill down to like, hey, this is what we're offering right now. And so so you could look at it different ways, but I would say most immediately, what's been interesting spans kind of DeFi and games, and the DeFi part of it. Um, I would say has a little bit more to do with some of our like broader strategy around kind of like liquidity provisioning and stuff, which we lost Santi. Hold on. Are you back?
You guys see me?
Yes, we can see you now. You're back.
I'm back, yeah.
So I think the more interesting, like I would say like the most interesting, feedback that we've gotten and like early interest that we've gotten that could be directly applied to testnet like right now would probably be, and this is not to discourage anything else. So if you want to see whatever crazy shit people build, honestly, spanning Solidity and Rust. But the reality is like right now, we do support Solidity contracts and Rust contracts. And one thing that's become very interesting to people is around like the gaming niche, where because a lot of game devs, a lot of games are built in Rust. Like a lot of gaming devs kind of like know how to program in Rust. A lot of gaming devs kind of understand, are often kind of like ZK pilled, like already coming in. They understand like WASM environments. And there's this like need for like higher performance things, which of course lend itself to Rust as well. So that's like one area that people found really interesting. There's also kind of like the extension of that across. This is almost just like a psychographic thing, but a lot of the folks from like the gaming ecosystem we found, like for example, specifically in autonomous worlds, um, really understand this like expressive, like hyper composable environment and like what that can bring. Think about like the whole premise of like an autonomous world. And I'm not saying like we're there yet. We're like that's going to take a while to play out, but at least in terms of the value prop of, oh, I could build this one primitive in Solidity or Rust, and other people can come compose on that easily, in all different languages. That's been like really compelling. So yeah, I mean we've been talking to like a bunch of other like DeFi protocols as well. Like there's some benefits to incorporating like Rust libraries for any different type of app, and a lot of people see that, and also just believing in the blended execution vision like has gotten people to want to like place just an early bet on us, frankly. But yeah, that's just a little bit on gaming. I don't know if the other guys have more they want to share.
Okay. Well, why don't we drill down into the DevNet itself and just more specifics for people. I assume most people listening, tuning in, are really just interested in, hey, what can I actually do here? What is available? What's not? So maybe one of you guys can just, why don't we just start like what is actually available and what's not, and how is it different maybe from other DevNets of other ecosystems?
Yeah, sure. So in this release, so it's our first public .NET release. What's the developer network is? So from our perspective, developer DevNet or development network is a network that is specifically targeted for developers, where we want to onboard developers. This is the goal of this release. We spent like months on development. We did three private DevNet releases to achieve most of features we were aimed for. Right now, we have support of all EVM instructions, including full EVM compatibility with all EVM standards, APIs, etc. It means that developers can already take their existing EVM-based applications that are developed using Viper, Solana, and run without any additional modification. They only change their RPC address. And as an addition to this, they can build WebAssembly-based applications. Right now, we have SDK for Rust language only, but nobody limits us to bring more SDKs for other languages like TypeScript or assembly script, C, C++, and etc. Right now, we force developers to use Rust because our SDK is still under development. We are modifying it from time to time. It will be extremely hard for us to support tens of different SDKs at the same time. So just for the optimization of delivering of new features, we keep on doing one Rust SDK for now, but in future it can change significantly. So in overall, developers can create EVM-based applications, they can build Rust applications, and they can do on-chain interaction between these two types of applications.
Got it. And what do you plan to achieve with this DevNet? You know, a lot of it is just getting feedback from teams that, you know, what maybe combination or what they're most interested in. But I'm curious, what are kind of some of the goals that you're or things that you're looking to achieve with this DevNet?
So I think the most important thing that we can get is a response from developers according to their development experience, because we must know the quality of APIs of products we provide, we serve for developers, and the product we are building must be very like efficient for developers in terms of development, in terms of how they do interaction, and all these things inside all these SDKs, low-level features like how we prove transitions, how we execute circuits, everything must be wrapped into our API, and we want developers to work with the most like efficient way. So we're waiting from developers to start develop their first applications, to start migrating their applications, and to see what are the most missing things, and they can start to fill the ecosystem Fluent with new applications that can work on the edge between EVM and WebAssembly features.
Got it. And I guess what's the experience going to be like, and how could they get started?
Sure. For now, I want to announce too that we launch our CLI tool with our public DevNet. So you can start in Fluent if you want to bootstrap your first project only by downloading our CLI tool that is available in crates.io. So you only need to do a cargo install Hello Fluent, and then you can bootstrap your project from Rust or Solidity.
Got it. Well, I'd like to just go maybe a little bit more specific on the blended component of things. So maybe Dimitri or Dino, you know, perhaps some developers out there might be wondering, hey, how does blended execution compare to like multi-VM? How does it actually kind of improve the dev and user experience?
Yeah, that's my favorite question. So I will try not to go very deep technically, so I try to explain it high level. The first thing, let's define what is multi-VM and its basic definitions. So multi-VM is an execution environment where you can run several virtual machines. So usually, like, you have two integrated virtual machines, and you can execute your application according to standards you use to deploy the application. So if the application is EVM, it's getting executed on EVM machine, and etc. So blended execution from our perspective is a bit different because we don't have multiple virtual machines inside. Instead, we have only one so-called first citizen assembly language. It's our version of WebAssembly that we call RWASM, Reduced WebAssembly, that is more friendly for ZK operations, for ZK proving process. And we have only one virtual machine inside. And all features like EVM compatibility, availability to run EVM instructions are achieved by simulating these instructions. I say simulating because it's not emulation. This is a huge difference. Because from our perspective, emulation, it feels like a 90s retro game emulator where you have strictly hardware optimized, accelerated hardware instructions, and the only way to run it on your modern computer is to run emulator of the entire CPU instruction set, and even entire CPU that brings significant overhead on the execution process. So instead, we call it simulation because we take all standards and we simulate it using our environment. So our environment provides special SDKs, and we create an execution environment precompiled contracts that are used to simulate the same behavior as, for example, required for all EVM standards, for all EEP standards, and etc.
Anything to add there, Dino? Or okay. And I guess I know we've touched on this a bit. You know, Dino and I mentioned who had reached out, but what are some of the kind of the unique use cases that blended execution enables? And maybe just drawing a little bit more in that comparison to like multi-VM and just like specifically what is very unique about blended execution.
So
Actually, go ahead.
yeah. So the first thing I want to mention before, so why it's important, because it also affects a developer experience when they work with the platform. Because the idea of blended execution, that since we support different standards, developers can just take their existing tooling and run the application without any additional modifications. So we provide like execution environment compatibility, tooling compatibility, standards compatibility, and etc. And by having all these standards, it means that you can have different standards inside one blended execution network, and you can build applications that work on the edge across all these different standards, and you can combine all these different standards. For example, you can create an application that expand available precompilers features for EVM and bring, because as you know, EVM has a very limited number of precompilers, but you can expand it. For example, we did show an example of a chess game that uses precompile for chess moves computations, and you can take any of existing Rust libraries to run these precompiles. So you can expand your EVM compatibility, EVM functionality by developing and creating new libraries. You can bring more cryptography, you can bring more functionality, you can take well-known open source trust audited libraries and use it in your application without any additional requirements for rewriting it, for porting it to Solidity. You don't have all these limitations with Solidity, stack size, and etc. And if the most important is that the nature of blended execution is expandable by default. So it means that since we have only one virtual machine inside, we can simulate more and more execution environments. And we're actually working on the integration of SVM right now. It means that we'll be able to support Solana transactions. And it opened for developers doors to create applications that work on the edge between EVM and SVM. So you can create an application that works in both networks at the same time. And due to the native composability and since all operations are synchronous, because it's all technically exist in the same tree, in the same state, you can do interaction between these EVM and SVM apps.
Yeah. I still remember the time where Joe Lubin DevCon announced, "Hey, we want to bring 1 million developers on chain," and I don't know where we are in that point, but there's been a lot of chatter around chain abstraction for the user. But how do you think about blended execution fitting in this whole theme of abstraction, maybe more at the development layer?
So go ahead, Chris.
Sure. Well, talking on how we can onboard with blended execution, I'll say it's pretty straightforward because we are aiming to, if you are a Rust developer that have been working with a lot of web to create, I think Fluent is the only way that you can have that experience and then start developing into it. Because if you have if you have working in Rust, the only thing that will change in Rust code is only putting decorators into it. So I think that's not that much of a learning curve. So you will have a lot of devs that have experience and can port those apps that they built in Web 2 into Web 3. So I think that's how we can minimize that, provide a good abstraction for our devs to migrate right away to Web 3.
Mm-hmm. And so maybe, I don't know, Dino, if you want to add anything there.
Yeah, I was just going to build on that a little bit. I know you mentioned kind of chain abstraction as well. And one thing that we want to make really clear is just because this design is really expressive and, we can, as Dimitri said, a key innovation of this blended execution network is the fact that we can actually add additional, VM targets, kind of simulate different things in a scalable and efficient way. That doesn't mean we're going to do all of them. And that also doesn't mean they're all going to fit in Fluent. We still very wholeheartedly believe in kind of the modular vision. And at the same, I think these things can live kind of in harmony where there's always going to be reasons why people want to have their own execution environments, or just there's all different types of trade-offs given, just think of it like a sandbox. Sometimes people just want their own sandbox. Sometimes people want their sandbox because it's their own sandbox because it's private. Sometimes it's a fundamental trade-off thing. Something might be parallelized, something might not be parallelized. Maybe they're different VMs getting blended. And then, so I feel there's this need to have these blended execution networks. Obviously, we've made a set of trade-offs and we've designed it a certain way for certain reasons. But we do envision that kind of going hand in hand with chain abstraction, because you still will end up having to provide the users an abstracted experience across all of these different, what we envision to be blended execution networks. And so we think it kind of works hand in hand. We're in a weird way, we're kind of doing something a little bit similar, within one sandbox, but there's always going to be, in our opinion, many different sandboxes.
Yeah. We can, I don't know if it's worth diving into a little bit more kind of specifics on what developers can do, how just going to, how can they port contracts, how can they build apps, blended apps. I'm curious if you guys want to go there, if that'd be worthwhile.
Well, one thing that I wanted to talk to is zooming out a little bit. What's our philosophy around this public DevNet, right? And one thing that honestly we've gotten kind of sick of for the past year or so is just vanity metrics and all of that kind of shit, right? And I feel the people who did this really well, in my opinion, was the kind of the early days of Solana. And there's only been a select few I think ecosystems that really had this ethos around just good product, almost pretend you're not in Web3 for a second. It's just build a kick-ass product, get people who really care about building kick-ass products on your execution environment. And frankly, that's just what we're trying to embody. We didn't, this, and I do feel it goes hand in hand. If you're not really innovating on the tech side, maybe you need to have this hyper polished thing and come out the gate with that. And it's all about the vanity metrics. But for us, we do really feel confident in this innovative design, and you know what, like it might be a little bit rough to start, but people are excited about it, and we just wanted to get it out there. I know we literally just announced this thing, and we're getting the Devnet out. We want people to just like, you know, grind their teeth on it a little bit, because we think that you know, there's some really amazing things that can be built, and I'm glad people are starting to see it. So anyway, that's kind of a little bit about more the philosophy behind what we're thinking with this public DevNet. Of course, we do have like natural questions come to mind around you know, infrastructure, like partners to enable like different types of apps, and also like different types of apps that are starting to build on us and apps that are porting over. We'll get to that. Like we'll announce all that. Like you know, that's clearly in the works. But we wanted to make a statement that's like not really the focus of this. The focus of this is like blended execution. We want to give people a chance to just like get in there and start hacking around. So just wanted to shed a little bit more light on that. But we can happily drill down into the specifics.
Yeah, and maybe like on this point alone, like, so if you're a developer, you know, you come to me, you want to raise money, okay, fine. You raise a round, you want to build a DeFi app or a perp protocol or whatever. You have a couple of options, right? You go directly into, you know, build on an EVM. You can go to Solana. You can go to a move-based L1 or what have you. When you go and talk to these developers, is the hope that like maybe this could be like a very great starting point to just get the benefit? One, get familiar with like the, you know, getting a blend of all these different ecos, like the benefits of a lot of them in one, and it's just easy to make this the primary landing spot for new teams. Is it more maybe existing teams that are in particular L1 that want to just maybe port over and like start experimenting towards a goal of like eventually deploying it natively in another L1? How do you think about like the type of developers coming in? Is it mostly new people? Is it existing protocols that, you know, maybe want to expand multi-chain, and this is a great kind of stepping stone? Curious how you think about that.
So far okay, so you can kind of split it between like existing dApps and kind of like new dApps. The existing dApps that we've been talking to, like predominantly in Solidity, of course, because we don't yet have SVM enabled, and so clearly most of the apps right now are like DeFi Solidity. And honestly, I feel like we're starting to see a sentiment, I'll say, like shift, at least from our conversations, from I think in a really healthy way. Like it's somewhere in between maybe what historically was like we're only on like one chain, between there and just like multi-chain spray and pray. We're actually starting to see some like interesting sentiment shift towards, no, we're going to be strategic about it. Like we might be on 5 chains, but we're actually going to pick those carefully, because it's almost like fool's gold in some ways to just like spray on all the chains. Like you fragment your own effort in terms of like BD bandwidth. Sometimes you fragment like the liquidity, you fragment different things, but also it might not make sense to like, you don't, you know, people don't want to like go the other extreme and just deploy on one chain. So I feel like now what we're seeing is some of these existing apps go through the decision-making process of like, okay, I do want to expand to a few chains, but I want to make sure it like really vibes. It really, there's like very clear like technical differentiation. And so those are like mostly the conversations that we're having. And I feel like we're getting really good reception from even just like Solidity dApps who are like, okay, like I get the blended thing, and that's like sufficient differentiation for me to place my bet on you, as opposed to the other single execution or the other EVM L2s or whatever. Because like I'm done with that game. Oh, you're muted, Santi.
Yeah, I was gonna say not only that, but it's also incredibly easy to get started, right? I mean, you can,
Yeah.
no matter, depending on where you're coming from, it's just like, you know, you can port over your EVM apps and contracts. You just change the RPC and you can kind of get started. You know, Rust is, you know, no matter what language you're familiar with, like it's just the level of effort to convince developers to try blended execution is what I'm trying to get at, is like very low, right? And with very minimal risk. Like why?
Yeah.
The question is almost like, why wouldn't you give this a shot? In my mind.
Yeah, for sure. And that is honestly what we're starting to see, which feels really good. Like it feels like, okay, hey, like we've made this thing like easy for people to get started, but the reason they're doing it is because they see like the vision of like what's going to be like, you know, built and how these languages are going to blossom. And it's just like not that hard to kind of stimulate people's imagination around like what's possible with this thing. Obviously, there's still a lot of education work we have to do though, um, and hopefully this is the real start to it, because we can like educate around like the concepts around this stuff like ad nauseum, and I will, but at the end of the day, like we need like dev feedback, and shape this around, to your question earlier, shape this around what people like really need for these early use cases, right? I mean, like Dimitri mentioned, like, we're focused on the Rust environment right now, or sorry, the Rust SDK right now. But it's like, okay, what's our next SDK, right? Like it could be TypeScript, and if this starts to, I certainly have like a kind of a thesis around like social consumer type experiences, and you know what, like if that starts to become more of a thing, we'll happily prioritize like a TypeScript SDK over a different type of SDK. So like I think this period of time is like critically important for us to just prioritize our roadmap. I don't know if you have any like different thoughts around that, Chris or Dimitri. I don't want to monopolize this whole thing.
I share the same in what you say. I think if you, when you're, this is the question, when you need blended execution, I think if you develop Solidity apps, let's say, just talking about the EVM ecosystem, you will face problems around if your code gets more complex. And I think a good way in order to achieve that, or to power up your normal EVM applications, will be migrating that part of heavy computation to Rust. If we talk about precompiles, if I'm not wrong, they have gas fixed when running, but you will need to pass through governance, let's say if you want to use another curve or whatnot. And I think you can use that part or consume that part from our Rust smart contract and directly consuming your Solidity smart contract. So I think Solidity, don't get me wrong, I think Solidity is a great language, but I think there's some problems around it that can be covered with Rust and with Fluent around it.
Yeah. I guess more concretely on this point, how can for all the devs out there listening, what's kind of the best way to get started? Is there a particular journey that you're suggesting or recommending, or yeah, maybe just a little bit more context there would be helpful, I think, for people.
Sure, I will say just go straight away to our new docs. They are fresh, very intuitive too. And then you can have like, okay, if you come from the EVM ecosystem or you want to just pour your app into our ecosystem, how you can do it. It's very straightforward, as Dimitri said. You only need to change your RPC, but it's all of this is our documentation. And then we have the blended execution tutorial. So where you build a smart contract in Solidity that will say hello, and then you have a Rust smart contract that will say world, and then you interact with it, and then you get the hello world string. So it shows you the capabilities of what you can do on Fluent. Besides that, we have our CLI tool. If you find it a little daunting about, hey, I need to do a lot of files in order to do this, just talking about the Rust part, then our CLI tool, just with one command, you can get all the templates that you need and just try code your app.
Nice. Dino, this is an area that you and I have chatted a bit offline, but how do you kind of envision getting support from the L1s themselves on this, and what kind of role, is there, maybe there's folks from, Solana Foundation or Aptos or some of these teams might be wondering, hey, how do we fit in? Is this, I'm curious, like, what would you say to that, or what's the strategy for getting them involved? Because I almost see it as a sort of like a either neutral or net positive, because if you're going to allow a developer to test out all these different kind of mod components, and it might ultimately be favorable for if a developer starts using blended, never thought about Solana, starts using the SVM for some things, and say, hey, well, maybe it's worth me at some point going full deployment there. So it's almost like a very net positive for all other ecosystems. I'm curious, but yeah, I'm just curious, what's the strategy there? Have you talked to them? Like, how can they play a role in all of this?
It's a good question. A few answers come to mind across a few different like ecosystems, and we are talking to everybody. We're trying to build this as much like just in the open as possible. I would say I mean, from my experience, like the Solana folks are just like kind of a similar vibe. Like they just appreciate kind of like good product, and I know they've been traditionally very supportive in all my interactions as well with like I guess propagating the SVM and like apps built for the SVM. So nothing but supportive so far. I know a few of them, you know, pretty well, but we'd of course love to talk to like more people from the Solana ecosystem if and you're listening. And what's been kind of interesting about it is even like other VM ecosystems, we're seeing really good like reception from that. Like we were just talking to the Fuel guys about integrating kind of the Fuel VM into. It's like, hey, like can we blend Fuel VM? We're like, yeah, absolutely. Like we can focus on that. And like the cool thing, and we could do that with other VMs as well. And we don't actually even have to. I think one cool area of alignment is this the fact that we're kind of like passively building this framework alongside the L2 as well, because it's not just okay if we integrate our VM. Oh, you're gonna steal from us. Like we might not even support some of these VMs on the L2, and some of them we might just support in the framework Fluent base itself. And of course, that works out for everybody because you know new blended execution networks can be spun up with a framework that can prioritize those types of VM targets. And so it's just like and different people. I'm starting to see it's probably too early to like share specifics around this because I think it's confidential from other ecosystems. But we're starting to like I'm starting to see different VM business models where it's like okay you can use like you know basically there's some kind of like values kind of even just like socially oriented value accrual if like you're using different VMs in different places just so everybody can kind of like win together. Like it's been really long-winded way of saying it's been like really positive sum whether it has to do with like L1 VM ecosystems or L2 VM ecosystems. Oh, you're muted again.
Sorry. You would think that I'd
Okay.
be better at this, given that I do a podcast every week, but I still don't. So maybe this a last point on the dev experience. Is it worth just talking a little bit about integration with Web2 libraries and what can devs kind of pull from and work with on this front?
Yeah, sure. So right now, we have compatibility with everything that compiles down to WebAssembly. There is only one requirement: your library cannot use any standard feature set from your operating system. Like you cannot access network, you cannot access operating system. I think it's quite reasonable. Most of libraries today have no STD support, so you can compile down to WebAssembly. We are thinking on bringing support or partial support of VASI execution environment. This is a special system call emulation for WebAssembly that can bring partial support of files, descriptors, networks, and etc. But that's still the discussion. It's a bit overcomplicated to support. I mean, in terms of proving process, it brings a lot of additional operations. So that we're trying to avoid. So we actually had VASI support in the past, but we removed it for this reason. So all libraries that are available today, I think most of libraries that are available from Web2 developers can take, no matter what. It's game engine libraries, some I don't know, computation libraries, math libraries, like social, some analysis libraries. They all can take these libraries and run on our platform.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I know it's been a great discussion. I mean, we've gone through kind of the high level stuff, the basics of what is blended execution, why it matters, how can developers get started, how perhaps if you're a developer working at a particular L1 or even an L2, like why this and how you can get involved, not just kind of more application developers. I'm really excited, Dino, as we had that conversation at the podcast. It's one of those things where it just feels like it creates not only lowers the barriers for developers to get started and test different types of combinations of execution environments and just get all the different benefits in one. And it's almost, again, I'll say it again, it's like why wouldn't you get started and why wouldn't you use blended execution? Not that's how I see it, but I'm not a developer. But I will be certainly encouraging a lot of the projects that I invest in. It's like, hey, go test this out, because something good might come out of that. It's one of those things that, like, it's just never been possible to combine these things and see what can, because we can think about, oh, can a particular DeFi application work better in a blended execution environment? Maybe. We're certainly going to see it, and I'm excited to see that outcome. But it's also like, what different or new applications that haven't been possible before um, start working in a blended execution environment, because you get a new type of developer that was never interested in developing crypto, or just the benefits of working in a blended execution environment. So a lot of that is unknown, but I guess, like, how long are you on this point? Like, going back to the initial question of, like, how would you measure success of this DevNet? How long is this running for, and what's kind of the best? I'll ask the question again, but what's kind of the best way for devs to get started, and what can they expect in terms of how long is the program going to last for? What's the best way to kind of get in touch with you guys and stay on top of all the developments happening?
I'm gonna chime in, just building off the first part that you mentioned, and then I'll pass it to these guys for kind of roadmap and timing and reaching out. Yeah, man. Obviously, some of it's unknown, but like I'll just repeat, like I'm never betting against developer ingenuity. Like you think about what happened, like early 2000s, right? It's like, okay, well, more band. I mean, computers come online, and people are like, okay, they're only going to need three computers in the world, whatever, like 50, 60, 70 years ago. It's like, okay, see how that happened. Like people find new uses. Like around the early 2000s, it's like, okay, what are you gonna do with more bandwidth? Like, I don't know. Like people find innovative things. You get Netflix, you get whatever. And like same thing happened with the browser. What are you going to do with more languages in it? You get Figma, and then all everywhere, like AI, GPU cores. Like what are you going to do with more GPU cores? You get Chat GPT. Like I'm, as you could tell, very excited to see what people build. But I'll pass it to these guys for kind of more kind of roadmap and reaching out and stuff.
Yeah, so the program for developer preview is going to stay, I think, until the public testnet release, because our DevNet, as we mentioned before, is focused for developers to let them start doing experiments, to start playing with this architecture and see what they can build. And the testnet is going to happen in fall this year. And for testnet, we're going to aim for acquiring users to to the platform and start doing like a full like end-to-end integration flow as a layer to roll up, and it's going to be like pre-mainnet release.
Nice. Devriel, anything to add?
No, I think we are expecting to have feedback from developers, so we can, if so, improve our SDK workflow, talking about the Rust part of it, or how we can construct smart contracts.
Mhm.
But yeah, I will say that we can measure our success in how many devs will start building on Fluent, and how apps or what ideas or any unique ideas they can craft with this blended execution environment.
Yeah. Wonderful. I guess as maybe a follow-up to this, what's after DevNet? And of course, I don't want you to say something that your engineers internally might kill you for, but or Dimitri. But I'm curious, like, so say DevNet goes really well, you have both in terms of number of developers, quality of projects, and applications being built. What's sort of the medium to grand vision for you guys as we look to close this out?
Just so I don't get killed by the engineer in the room, why don't you, Dimitri, you could take this one.
So what's after DevNet? So the idea is, so the design of system is the system is designed to be extensible. So we want to so onboarding developers is the first stage. The second stage is to onboard system like expanders, the ones who can work on the expansion of the system and bring more execution environment support. So we're working on the next stage of our SDK, where developers can create not only shared applications, but also create applications that can run other applications, like develop new execution environments. And it's still under development. We're going to provide the new SDK and for developers soon, like in a couple of months. And after that, I can go even further. And the third stage is to provide developers a full end-to-end SDK that they can use to develop like the dedicated application that runs fully outsourced from our computation environments, that manage its own state and settle everything to our network, where we aggregate all proofs and then settle it to layer 1 of Ethereum.
Oh man, L3s and stuff. I thought I would have gotten yelled at for saying that, but I'm glad he did.
Yeah, I don't like to call it layer 3 because
Yeah.
if you call it layer 3, you force developers to create blockchains. But why do they need to create blockchains? Maybe they just want to run a dedicated execution environment, like from Web 2. Well, maybe they want to run some distributed network that, I don't know, works on the edge for edge computations and aggregate all these proofs and settle. Why not? So maybe they want to run a verifiable exchange that works independently from chain. So we don't want to limit developers, so we don't call it a layer 3. We call it like, I don't know why layer 3 is shades with blockchain development, some why, but we call it dedicated applications because they are literally dedicated from our computation platform.
Yeah. Well, amazing, guys. Well, I think this is a really good discussion. I hope we had a Q&A, but we don't. But people, I guess, can comment on the YouTube or on Twitter, and then we can maybe look to do a follow-up, maybe once we have more developers on and can address more questions. But any parting thoughts, guys, or just, anything else that we should cover?
No, I think we're good, man. We covered a lot. Really appreciate you coming on. If you're dev and this resonates with you in general, like reach out. You know where to find us. We're all accessible on X. Hit up our man Chris. Slide in our Discord. Hit DM me, whatever. But we are excited to see what you build.
Yeah, for sure.
Just want to point out, if you're going to ECC, feel free to DM me so we can chat about Fluent and what you can build on it.
Maybe on ECC, because I think I'm going to go. I said I was not going to go. Are you guys hosting a particular panel or offsite, or are you talking at any of the days there?
Yeah, we are participating in a Modular. It's a hacker house called Modular House. We will be doing a workshop around blended apps, and we will have Dimitri doing a whiteboard session on how Fluent works.
That's great.
Yeah.
More reasons to go to ECC in Brussels. Okay. Well, great. Guys, thanks so much for taking out time out of your day to go through this. I know it almost makes me want to go and learn how to code, but maybe you'll make it so easy that I won't have to. But thanks everyone for listening and tuning in. We'll probably be doing one of these at some point later on just to get an update on how things are going. But wishing you all the best, guys, and really exciting stuff.
Thanks so much, Santi. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.